For over half a century, humans have endeavored to make business a force for good. But is the movement working? Or is it time to explore a new path forward? Welcome to Less Talk, More Action. We are your hosts, Joel Caesar and Owen Barrett, experts in clean energy, net zero real estate, decarbonization, and entrepreneurship. In each episode, we ask provocative questions and share stories from the front lines of sustainability with leaders in science, tech, and business taking real action to design a cleaner, better future. Thanks for joining the conversation. Now, let's get to work. Welcome to Less Talk, More Action podcast. My name is Joel Caesar, the world's undisputed voice of building decarbonization. Joining me as always is Owen Barrett, the self-proclaimed Adam Newman of Green Building. Today's guest is nobody. We are doing a solo show where you can hear from ourselves, the experts on all things sustainability, climate, entrepreneurship, and we're going to dive right into some interesting topics. You know, we've referenced it a bunch on the show. We're big fans of the All In podcast, so kind of that format, right? I threw you some ideas earlier today about things that are in the news in our industry. We're going to talk about the conference we were at last week, and we're just going to have some fun batting this around. You ready?
People are gonna like it. Yeah, I think people like the banter, the witty banter.
Yeah, well, I mean, on that note, last week at the IMN ESG and Decarbonizing Real Estate Forum, a few people who I'd never met before came up to me and said, hey, love the podcast. And one gentleman specifically told me his favorite part is when we make fun of each other.
So love it. It was a good podcast.
It was actually really cool feedback, and I don't want to do this too much because let's get into content people actually care about. But, we try to do our goal on the show was to have a different voice, was to, we were like annoyed or like missing a podcast or a media outlet that brought this conversation made it lighter, made it fun, made it provocative, made it real. There's too many just wonky, boring, in the weeds conversations that like even people like you and I who live and breathe this stuff can't even get through 10 minutes of. So I thought it was cool feedback to hear that, the things we're trying to do to make it different are resonating.
Yeah, I agree. That's awesome.
All right, so we're going to talk about IMN in a bit, but let's first jump in to a gentleman named Gus Bartholomew. He's the co-founder of Leafer. He's going to be a guest on the show coming up.
Cool.
I think he's based in the UK. If you follow him on LinkedIn, he's got cool content. He's always talking about sustainability in general and the challenges of sustainability teams and the challenges and the movements and evolution of net zero and climate targets and how this whole industry is moving forward. I don't always agree with him, but at least he's producing interesting content. And he posted today actually about F1. So are you an F1 fan?
No, I mean, I know what it is. Not a fan.
So I know a lot of people are, right? It's growing huge popularity. I think it's always been pretty popular in Europe and maybe Asia, and now the US is definitely picking up. I think based on there was a Netflix show a couple years ago that really elevated its stature in the States. I know a few people who love it, live and breathe it, like almost like they're NFL fans, kind of crazy about it. But interesting, this post was about how F1, the organization itself, has a net zero commitment, and they're kind of doubling down on it, even in this moment where a lot of big companies and countries and cities are maybe pausing on how committed they were to these things. And, I think the headline says it all. He says at the top, what are those bloody gas guzzlers up to? Formula One says it'll hit net zero by 2030. And I saw that, I was like, give me a break. Like, what's this going to be? A bunch of offsets and no action? But seems to be some cool stuff in here, like organizing the event schedule in a systematic way to reduce travel, right? Jumping from city to city that makes sense in an order that reduces the emissions of just those distances, and doing things with the manufacturing facilities and I think the shops where the cars are serviced to run on renewable energy. So I don't want to read every stat here. I'd encourage everyone to go check out Gus's profile and read more about it. But I got some thoughts, but what do you think off the top of your mind?
I mean, this post brought a couple of different thoughts. First of all, I think it's great. I think it's great that an organization like F1 is trying to do this. But it also made me think that I think there should be two distinct categories of net zero. There should be real net zero, which is no offsets, no carbon credits, and then there should be fake net zero. And I think they are going to end up being fake net zero, unfortunately.
Well, they say at the
And
bottom here, I'll read it. They know the last bit will be really hard, but have committed to any remaining emissions in 2030 being offset but only with credible science aligned programs.
so I guess what this makes me wonder is what's more important to see how close you can get to being real net zero and avoiding these RECs or carbon credits, even if they're supposedly science based and there's
Removals,
evidence
which
that they
we've
actually exist,
removals, which we've made fun of before on the show. Yep.
or being able to claim that you're net zero because you've used these stupid credits and RECs.
Yeah.
And I think that's a part of the problem with the industry because it's hard. Like they've done a lot of really incredible things, it looks like. And I mean, they're making real progress to cutting emissions. And I would advocate that they keep doing the things that actually matter rather than waste money on RECs just so they can claim that they're net zero. And I know that's probably hard for our industry to hear, but I'd rather see more direct emission reductions from companies and not have them get to net zero rather than a bunch of people making these fake claims. Not that F1 is doing that, but there's a lot of companies out there that do.
Yeah, it's really tricky. That's why this was an interesting topic to discuss here today because my first thought around a lot of this is because of some of my recent experience in my career and how we've all seen, of course, over the last couple of years, this like trend regressing from the what was a very huge tailwinds to the industry of net zero, and I'm using air quotes here. You might say in 2020, 2021, and now over the last few years, kind of that trend going the opposite direction, and just being like, you know what, like, why did we ever think this was going to work? Like, this is crazy. There's always going to be economic downturns. There's always going to be new technology. Of course, it's like insane to even think what's happening with global emissions with the boom of AI, and it's like, well, why are we even trying? So let's just stop with the commitments and stop with the different definitions of net zero and stop with the science-based targets and what they call scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. It's all just a waste of time. What we should do as people who care about climate and think it's important and think companies and governments should take action, that's the side we're on. We're not we're not climate skeptics here. But to your point, they should all focus every single resource on doing what they can to decarbonize the thing that they do, right? And not be distracted and not have other resources going into things that are like measuring and reporting so that they can comply with some third party's definition of what is net zero. So I don't know what my take exactly is here on to say, one, I think this is impressive. Like you said, F1, like, look, they went from 228,000 tons of CO2 a year in 2018, and now they're down to 168. Like, and this is in an industry
Yeah,
that is
a
running
big
cars on
decrease.
fossil
Yeah.
fuels, and it's growing in popularity, and it's growing in the global reach of where they run these races. So that's incredibly impressive, and that's what they should focus on. And they're using biofuels, and they're retrofitting the buildings that they operate in. And like you said, these are all the things that like is directly impacting the core operations of their business and is changing those industries for the better and is probably profitable for them doing all those things.
Yep.
But this last piece of credible science aligned programs, carbon removal stuff, while again, we've talked about this a few times, cool technologies, interesting work, I just can't believe it's ever going to really matter. So like, let's stop wasting our time on it.
Yeah, and the last thing that I would say too that this brought up for me is I would love to get someone on the pod who is an expert in sustainable fuels. Because
Yeah.
I've always heard that if you do the life cycle assessment of like gasoline with ethanol versus just 100% gasoline, that it's not actually better. So I don't know how they're arriving. I mean, I'm sure there's some calculations that's going into this, but they say they're getting to 50% electric and 100% powered by sustainable fuels. Well, who's doing the calculations in those sustainable fuels to determine whether or not it's actually better than gasoline?
And
And
what
I think
is
that's a wider
sustainable?
conversation, right? Because it's not
Yeah.
just for F1, that's for everybody. I go to the gas
Avi-
station, I'm
a-
still confused.
Aviation, you fly on
Yeah,
Delta and they claim
yeah.
they're going net zero. It's like, what the hell? Yeah. But I think, you're right. We should, because I'd love to learn and ask more about it, because I think you're even oversimplifying the definition of sustainable fuels by saying it's
Hmm.
adding ethanol. There's ways they're
There's
thinking they
all
can
sorts of
like
stuff. Yeah.
reverse engineer carbon dioxide, pull it out of the atmosphere and create fuel with it. Like that's a
Yeah.
futuristic technology, which of course sounds awesome. So
Let's get
yeah,
the chief scientist of F1 who's in charge of sustainable fuels. If he's listening, you're welcome to
that,
come on the pod.
yeah,
Or
and I don't
she.
know. I don't know if you listen to the All In. Like they love the F1. They went to Monaco, I think, and
Yeah.
this is a highfalutin kind of crowd that we would love to hang out with. Let's go to the Vegas show and do a live episode.
Yeah,
All
because
right.
us and all in
Well, that
right
was
next to each
fun.
other.
Well, Gus, if you're listening, great content. Please keep posting. F1, keep doing your thing. I thought you were going to say too, sustainable fuels. I agree. I want to get someone from like science-based targets or carbon disclosure, the ones that are like defining what is credible science-aligned programs and
Yeah.
the definitions of net zero, and get their take on this. Because again, we don't want to be dismissive. We want to kind of hear everyone's perspective. Maybe there's things we're missing in the conversation.
Probably not though.
Yeah, yeah. I know you think you know everything. All right, let's move on. So, next topic. Last week, you and I were in Dana Point, California for the IMN, ESG, and Decarbonizing Real Estate Forum. We talked about it on a previous episode that we were going there, and we did a little bit about the panels we were looking forward to, and kind of made some jokes about what we thought we might hear. Um, I'll let you go first. Of course, as you said when we talked about it in the last show, it's a great conference. We encourage others to attend. Like in all the conferences we go to, this is like one with really great people, really great content, beautiful location. So lots of reasons to go. But what's your take? What was the coolest thing you heard, or what's some maybe the hot take from the week?
Well, I think you'll like what I'm about to say, and that's that my prediction was wrong from 2 weeks ago, or whenever we did that bit about what we think we're going to see at the IMN conference, and I was complaining like I normally do about how everyone's going to talk about reporting and all the reporting that they have to do, and I came out of it optimistic because been going to this conference for 4 years, and this is the first time I've heard sort of a murmur of reporting fatigue, which I
Mm,
thought was very interesting. Came
yeah.
up on a couple panels. I heard people talking about it in, private conversations. People in the industry are starting to get a little bit sick of how much reporting we do. They're starting to elevate the conversation. Um, I think we as an industry should push for GRES to be every other year reporting.
Mm,
I don't really understand why it can't be. I think that would take a huge amount of pressure off of these commercial real estate companies. And so I came out of there with a new bit of optimism that we are finally moving to a place of, okay, we've got the reporting down, we've got the data. Now let's get some shit done. Like let's move to the action part of the equation, which I think is really refreshing.
agreed. And we're gonna have someone from Gresb on the show here in a few episodes, so we'll get to ask him lots of our perspectives and see what their vision is. Because I know that gentleman, and I had some conversations with him, and I think they hear it and they know it too. And to be fair with them, like they're in a tough spot. They set out to do the right thing, and a lot of times these third party frameworks, it's hard to like meet everyone where they are and try to have a framework that like aligns with like so many different stakeholders' goals. So let's give them benefit of the doubt that they're trying to do the right thing, and I think that's why these conferences are meaningful, so that we can all get together as thought leaders in the industry from all these different like perspectives and start to elevate like what is the commonality that we're all thinking and feeling right now. And if you felt that, I'm sure you're not the only one.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you?
Well, again, I'll just, for those who aren't in the weeds like us in real estate, commercial real estate, and sustainability, don't know what this conference is. It is very focused on large scale commercial real estate. Would you agree? Like
Yeah.
big, big,
Yeah.
big firms, big
I'd
private
say, yeah,
equity,
huge
big public
firms. Yeah.
REITs, the ones who are like moving the needle on the large scale decision making about how we operate, how buildings and funds and investments operate towards sustainability in a highly regulated and growing in complexity as far as those regulations industry. So there's motivation to do sustainability because lots of companies think that's a differentiator and they're going to attract the right investment. There's others that are just doing it because they're afraid of the regulations, and probably a lot of in between. So with that said, I would say another theme I heard was how the cost of energy is no longer immaterial. You've probably heard this more than I have over your career, that you talk to people in real estate and, the cost of energy, the cost of utilities, even as you and I would be like, oh, it's important, it matters, it can change NOI and it can make yourself profitable. Usually they're like, I don't even look at my utilities. Like when it
Yeah.
comes to like interest rates matter, taxes matter, rent matters. Like that word immaterial has been used a lot. And like there was a gentleman, you and I both know him. We're not going to name names here, but head of sustainability, a huge multi-family private equity, hundreds of assets across the states. And, he's operating in a tough environment in a lot of ways. He's been there a while. He's very credible, but like everyone else in that seat, sometimes the asset managers and property managers and C-suite care what he thinks and want his perspective. And sometimes they're just like, dude, just, make sure we don't get fined. And he's like, as of like very recently, he's got asset managers across the country being like, yo, they're saying my electricity rates are going to jump 40% in the next 12 months. Like, what are we
Get
doing?
ready. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a good segue to our next part of this conversation. But I guess just have your reaction. Are you agree with that take? Have you heard that too?
So I didn't hear that in the conference, but I mean, I absolutely agree with it. I think I think it's a couple different things at the same time, right? Like I think the value add playbook that we've seen for the last 10 years within multifamily or longer, 12 years, it doesn't work anymore. Like we are not in an environment where you could just raise rents because you've replaced a laminate countertop with granite. And like you said, property taxes are higher and insurance is higher and interest rates are higher.
Higher.
And so I think it's like asset managers now have to get more creative.
Mm-hmm.
How can we create value in a way harder environment than what we've been seeing for the last 10 to 12 years? And naturally it's cutting expenses. That's something that's been overlooked, not just electricity, like expenses overall, I think are overlooked in large part. So I think people are being forced to get more creative and they're starting to see the headlines about what's going to happen with electricity thanks to old Donnie. So let's we could jump to the next one, but yeah, I think it's all connected.
There's a woman, she's an ex-colleague of mine from Google, and she's launched a competitor to Cambio out of Europe. So
I can't believe that.
I'm not gonna throw her too much highlight here on the show, but she's really smart, and I respect her opinion. And she posted recently on LinkedIn how energy efficiency retrofits can and should be its own asset class at this point.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, yeah.
So
I mean, I think we're. Well, you want to just jump to the next one?
yeah, so let me tee you up. We had some banter, I guess it was on your post about our recent show where we were celebrating Aaron Tartakovsky. So if you haven't listened to that episode and you're listening to this one, go back. He's
It's a good
fantastic,
one. Yeah,
talking about his innovative water reuse systems that he puts in huge skyscrapers in San Francisco and LA and New York and going across the world. Really fascinating guy. But when you posted about him, I don't even know what prompted the conversation for me to sort of nudge you on it. But I know you have an opinion going right now that what's your nickname for it? Donnie's Big Bill.
Donnie's Big Bill.
So Donnie's Big Bill. I don't know what it's actually called. The Big Beautiful Bill. I think it's got
One
an
big beautiful
yeah
bill.
one easy OBBB. And now the
For
hot
for a
take.
marketing genius, I mean, I
That
guess
wasn't
it's
his
easy to
best work.
remember. Yeah,
Yeah,
like come on,
he's usually pretty good at the one-liners. Donnie, maybe you should come on. We'll workshop it with you.
let's get Donnie on.
Oh yeah, wouldn't that be great? Um, but how, of course, in the leading up to the bill's passing, everyone in our industry posting on social media, sending out newsletters, kind of galvanizing movements to speak to senators and representatives to just try to stop this bill because it was going to crater and end the entire sustainability renewable energy industry. And I think those concerns were valid, but probably overstated. And then the bill passed, and I think I've said it a few times recently, especially on LinkedIn, like, all right, everyone, it passed. So stop whining and let's figure out a way to take advantage of it, one, or at least learn how we navigate through it. Because the movement we're a part of is bigger than any short term legislation. I think we can all agree. But I don't think anybody is taking the perspective right now, at least as loudly as I've seen you, to say maybe this is actually a boom for the energy efficiency and solar industry. So I teed you up. Why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I do think that 2026 and 2027 are going to be kind of dark times for the solar industry. I think you're going to see a lot of companies go out of business. I think you're going to see volume be way down. But I think for companies and organizations that can kind of push through those times and just stay in business through 2028, you're going to have this crazy tailwind effect that no one really expected from this bill. Well, I don't think anyone expected it, but there's no way to avoid electricity prices increasing at a rate that we have never seen before. And the reason why is according to FERC, not me. So the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, said that in 2024, renewable energy sources accounted for over 90% of new electricity generation in the United States. 90%. I mean, that's a crazy number. And so now
Crazy.
you have this bill that effectively acts as that. Um, a lot of institutional investors are investing in utility scale solar, battery storage at a utility scale. They don't like volatility. And so this bill introduces volatility. So they're all going to pull back, and that's going to cause electricity prices to spike all across the country. And you couple that with the data center energy demand that we see going on. Joel, I don't know if you read this. There's a data center in Louisiana that it's a meta data center, and it's going
Yeah.
to use as much electricity as 20% of all of Manhattan, which
I
is
saw I saw an
wild.
image where they overlaid the rendering of the size of this data center over the island of Manhattan, and it covers like from the southern tip of Manhattan up to Harlem. It's
I
nuts
mean,
how
it's
big this thing
great.
is going to
It's
be.
crazy. So you have this huge demand from data centers, and then you have effectively 90% of new generation being taken offline. Maybe it's not that bad, but it's a big percentage of that. And I foresee electricity prices increasing at a minimum of 10% per year for the next 5 to 10 years, which will ultimately offset the loss of the tax credit. So I think you're going to see a tailwind effect from this bill. It's going to take a little bit of time. Um, but I think ultimately the renewable energy industry and the energy efficiency industry are going to be in better places because it's easier to get projects to pencil out with high cost of electricity.
It's easier to sell when electricity cost is high. Yeah, I mean, last year when I was at Block Power, we were trying to install heat pumps and decarbonize low income buildings everywhere. And my title was head of green cities. We had these contracts with city governments, and we had them in the wrong cities. We had them in cities where the city staff had sustainability people that wanted to incentivize and encourage and hire companies like us to try to install heat pumps, but then they can't make private building owners do it. And in a lot of those same markets, gas was cheap, and so
Yeah.
like it just didn't work. And so I think, like you said, if it's an interesting dynamic here. Like, probably this isn't good if you're thinking about emissions in general, but if you work in the field of energy efficiency and solar, this might be good for your business in the
Yeah.
future, as you said.
Yeah. I think
And I,
too, it's just important to come back to that optimistic lens. Like it's so easy to get trapped in this doom and gloom and everything's falling apart. The tax credit's going away, like blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, I mean, it's not good ultimately, but it could be better in the long run if you look at it the right way. And these forces come together. I think what a lot of people miss is like, yes, there are alternatives to renewable energy. There is natural gas and there is small scale nuclear that we're
yeah,
moving towards. I've heard natural gas takes 5 years to come online because you can't get turbines,
I keep
and
hearing that too. Why the
small
hell is
scale
it so?
renewables 8 to 10.
If the whole world is looking for these turbines that take 5 years to procure, who the hell's making these turbines? Like, what if we were in World War III? Would we be able to make them then?
I don't think so, man. I don't know, but it's the same. I don't know. It's a great question. Maybe we can get someone from like Caterpillar on the
Yeah.
pod and explain why it takes 5 years to build these things or to get them online. I have no idea, but like so you're cutting supply and then you're expecting new demand or new supply to wait 5 years to go online. Like you tell me what's going to happen. There's
Well,
no way prices aren't going up.
whoever runs for president in 2028, they're going to have to. Well, it's going to be crazy if their position isn't all of the above energy, and it's
Yeah.
gonna, this isn't gonna be please the really hardcore sustainability crowd, but like, look, this is where it's going. AI is just too big, and so the
Yeah.
country, the world needs every piece of electricity they can make and get it to online as cheap and as fast as possible. And to
And then
that point,
hopefully the robots get smart enough to actually solve climate change because apparently we can't.
well, the point I was going to make, though, I think the person's going to come in, even if it's a Republican, is going to have to be like, look, what they tried to do here against renewables was nuts. Like, we're not, and they're going to have to come back to the center. The Republicans, I'm like, we also want an all of the above energy strategy, including renewables, which a lot of people like, and we're doing really well, even in a lot of red states. So I think, I grew up in Pennsylvania. The governor there, he's leaning hard. He was at an event with Trump out in
Yeah, the
Pittsburgh.
AI. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's like he's promoting shale and gas like probably he wouldn't have 4 years ago. And he's a Democrat. So I think yeah, then we'll see. I guess this is a good way to wrap up because we usually ask our guests at the end, what gives you hope for the future. I think you just did yours. What's to be optimistic about? And I would do the same. Look, this show just did we talk in a lot of different directions, but you got F1, these huge organizations that are growing and are fossil fuel based industries committing to net zero still, doubling down on it. And then we have Donnie's Big Bill, which is pushing back on the momentum of our industry. But then you and I were at a conference with the biggest commercial real estate investment entities in the world who are pushing forward with their sustainability targets because they don't like volatility either. And they're predicting that the future is going to require them to be as energy efficient and sustainable as possible. So, yeah, I think all that to be said, there's a lot if you're in this industry to be hopeful for your career. There's going to be a lot of work ahead. There's going to be a lot of opportunity, and there's going to be great opportunities to deploy new technologies to solve not just climate sustainability, but new business opportunities to be a part of in your career.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap it up there. Thank you, Owen. We don't have guests to plug, but we'll plug each other. What's your business? You got your Shine is not too active on LinkedIn, but you are yourself. You got a
We
great company.
prefer actually doing work than just spouting about potential work.
There you go. That's impressive.
Yeah.
And you can find me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and my company Cambio is more and more active. And we had a great time last week at IMN. Took some people surfing, which was very cool. We missed you out in the water. I feel like you've lost your surf vibes.
I don't surf as much as I used to, but I had a better networking event to go to that morning with our boy Alex.
Yeah, that's fair. He's a friend of the show. Shout out to
No,
Alex.
I'll be at the surfing one next time. You and Alex got to coordinate so you guys aren't competing for talent.
We talked about that.
All right.
Well, thank you everyone else for joining. Again, you can find Owen and I on LinkedIn, antagonizing the sustainability crowd. You can find this podcast and more great content at letstalkmoreaction.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends. And until next time, we encourage you to ask yourself, what are you doing to take action to make the world a better place?